How's it going, everybody? Lampini here, and today we're going to be going over Week 16 of the 2024 NFL season. So, Week 15 was one of my lesser weeks in terms of my predictions. I went with a couple upsets that didn't actually pan out for me. For the week, I was 11-5. Some of the games that I had predicted upsets on that didn't happen was I thought the Panthers were going to beat the Cowboys. Didn't happen. I thought the Dolphins were going to beat the Texans, and that didn't happen. The Buccaneers surprisingly beat the Chargers. The Eagles beat the Steelers. More on the Eagles a little bit later. And then the Bills beat the Lions. I'm not really surprised about that one. For the season, I'm still up by a considerable amount. 160-64 are my predictions. I'm very excited for Week 18 when I can finally go over my final prediction list, my percentage that I got right, and all that great stuff. But without further ado, let's kick things off with Thursday night. So Thursday night is primed to be a very, very interesting game. We have the Denver Broncos at the Los Angeles Chargers. These are two wildcard teams in the AFC, and they have both established an identity for themselves that they didn't have last year. Jim Harbaugh has done a great job building the Chargers up to an 8-5 record, and Sean Payton is finally getting his chops as head coach of the Denver Broncos, moving them up to an 8-5. I don't think anybody is really going to be threatened per se when it comes to the wild card spot, but this will be interesting in terms of seeding purposes, right? The Broncos took care of business against the Indianapolis Colts, 31-13. Bo Nix was 20 of 33 for 130 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 3 interceptions as well. Had a couple good games there, but now he's starting to come back down to earth, and Jane Daniels is reminding us that he's Offensive Rookie of the Year and not Bo Nix. That being said, Bo Nix is still having a pretty good rookie season, and he's doing a very good job. As for the Chargers, they were surprisingly beaten very badly by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, 40-17. The Buccaneers scored 27 unanswered points in the second half. The Chargers did not score a single point in the second half. Pretty shocking loss if you ask me, but the Chargers are still fine. They're still in their wild card spot like they were. So I wouldn't say that it's that worrying of a loss. If they drop 2 in a row, then it does become an issue. So Justin Herbert was 21 of 33 for 195 yards, 2 touchdowns, an interception, and an 87.3 passer rating. Okay game by him. He finally threw his second interception of the season. He's been doing really well with that. This is going to be a very tough game to call, though, because I feel like both of these teams are in a very similar situation. You know, if we look at the point differential between the two of these AFC teams, you look at the Chargers are at 47, and then the Broncos are at 89. They have the second highest point differential in the AFC. So they have quietly become one of the better teams in the entire NFL. And it's going to be very interesting to see what happens in terms of who they end up facing in the playoff picture. Right now, the Broncos are the 6th seed, and the Chargers are the 7th seed. Pardon me, the Broncos are 9-5, the Chargers are 8-6, so pardon me on that. But right now, Denver is the 6th seed, Chargers are the 7th, which means that the Broncos would end up playing the... How does that work? The Broncos would be playing the 3rd seed, and then the Chargers would play the 2nd seed. So yeah, the Chargers would be playing the Bills. I mean, they could upset the Bills, but I'd be very surprised if they did. And the Broncos are playing against the Steelers, which I could see them maybe winning, but the Steelers are a very strong team. But again, we'll get to them later. I'm going to go with the home team here. I'm going with the Chargers. I think that their offense is going to be enough. I just don't think Bo Nix is there yet. And the Chargers have an extremely good defense. And that's what's ultimately going to be the big factor here, is that Bo Nix isn't going to be able to put points on the board, and the Chargers will. So I'm going with the Chargers. Next up, we have the Houston Texans at the Kansas City Chiefs. Both teams are coming off of victories. The Chiefs are 13-1. The big story here is if Patrick Mahomes is going to be able to play, simply. The Chiefs ended up beating the Browns 21-7, which is like, I forget what the stat was, but it's like their second game that they haven't won by 1 possession. It was a very comfortable win by them. Like I said, it all hinges on if Mahomes can play. He threw 2 touchdowns on the game. Other than that, it wasn't super impressive. I think the Chiefs need to fire Matt Nagy as the offensive coordinator because he is holding Mahomes back. They need somebody who can really unlock his true potential, and I think they will. All offensive coordinators are going to be nipping at the gills to work with Mahomes. As for the Texans, they beat the Dolphins 20-12. CJ Stroud had probably one of his better games of the season in this sophomore slump campaign that he has. He was 18 to 26, 131 yards, 2 touchdowns, 106.4 passer rating, which was pretty good showing there. I'm going to go with the Chiefs on this one. I don't think the Texans are going to be able to upset them, and they have looked very, very pedestrian in their record so far. They are 9-5, but they've been a very pedestrian 9-5. Like, no team in the playoffs is really scared of them, and I think this is going to be a very big show-up game for the Texans. If they get absolutely trounced by the Chiefs, then their morale is going to go down significantly. So I'm going with the Chiefs on this one. So this next game is going to be a real barn burner. It is a 4:30 p.m. Saturday night affair. We have the Pittsburgh Steelers at the Baltimore Ravens. In my opinion, the hottest rivalry in the NFL. But both of these teams were in completely different spaces in week 15. The Ravens defeated the Giants 35-14, and Philadelphia Eagles beat the Steelers 27-13. To put it simply, the Steelers laid an egg in that game against the Eagles. I thought it was going to be a very good game, a very close game, but the Eagles really showed up, and they really beat them badly. As for the Ravens, they did what they were supposed to do. They destroyed a bad team, and Lamar Jackson is an expert at destroying bad teams. He was 21 of 25, 290 yards, 5 touchdowns, 154.6 passer rating. That's just bonkers. Those are bonkers numbers. That is crazy. He threw more touchdowns than incompletions. Another all-time great game by Lamar Jackson. But it was against the Giants. And that's what everyone is going to say. It was against the Giants. So they need to do something against a good team like the Steelers to really be taken seriously. Urinating Tree is a YouTuber that I follow, and he describes the Ravens as paper tigers. What was it? Paper tigers? Paper dragons? Something like that. Paper tigers basically means that they show up against bad teams, do extremely well, but when they have to face good teams or they're in the playoffs, they fold. You know, you can never take the Ravens lightly. You can never take the Steelers lightly, frankly. They're coming off of a really bad loss, and they are going to want to show up for this game. But it's at home. The Ravens have a chance to take the division from the Steelers if they win. And I think that's going to be enough of an incentive for the Ravens to pick up the victory in this game. It's going to move them up to the number 3 seed. They're going to be playing at home for a playoff game, and it's just going to be an all-around better situation for them. So for that reason, I'm going to go with the Ravens. I think the Steelers are going to be in a bit of a slump after losing to the Eagles like they did. So I'm going with the Ravens. Next up, we have the New York Giants at the Atlanta Falcons. I'm not going to go over this one too much. The Giants are right down there with the Raiders as one of the worst teams in the league. Tommy DeVito and Tim Boyle were the starting quarterbacks for the Giants. They are the definition of what happens when you bottom out as a team. They have completely bottomed out, and they are just, it's pathetic. To say the least, it's pathetic. As for the Falcons, a bit of a different story with them. They beat the Raiders 15-9. It's a miracle that it was that close to the game. It should not be 15-9 against the Raiders. I think that is still a more moral loss for the Falcons. They are 7-7, and it all hinges on Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins has not played like himself the last couple weeks. He had a 500-yard game a couple weeks ago, and he was having some pretty vintage Kirk Cousins performances where, like, he plays genuinely well. You know what I mean? He has those games. He had a "you like that game with you 500 yards," and, you know, he's in the locker room saying "you like that." There's obviously the greatest comeback in NFL history that he had a couple years against the Colts. But the big story is Father Time finally catching up with him. He's 36 years old. Once you get past 35 and you get into your late 30s as a quarterback, that's when it's like, is the clock starting to tick? You know, Matt Ryan got old overnight last year when he was 37. Matthew Stafford is 36, and he's still slinging the ball extremely well. And Aaron Rodgers is 41. We'll go over his game, but he turned back the clock a little bit in that performance. But it seems like Kirk Cousins is starting to lose the zip on the ball. It looks like he's starting to fade. Mid-season, he's starting to fade, and it's really sad to see. The Falcons are going to win this game, though. If they lose to the Giants, then it is complete panic mode for them. But I don't think that's going to happen. I think they are going to still win. They're going to beat the Giants. They are benefiting from an easy schedule. They're going to improve to 8-7. The problem is they're not going to make any noise if they make it in the playoffs. They are going to be one of the easiest teams to just knock out as a wild card team. They're going to be one of the easiest teams to just knock out and advance from. So I'm going with the Falcons, but they have a lot more bigger issues ahead of them. Next up, we have the New England Patriots at the Buffalo Bills. The Bills are coming off of a very impressive win against the Detroit Lions, 48-42. Josh Allen having another MVP caliber game. 23 of 34, 362 yards, 2 touchdowns, 122.4 passer rating on top of 2 rushing touchdowns. So last week he had 6 total touchdowns. This week he has 4 total touchdowns. He is ending the season extremely well. I think from a statistics standpoint, Lamar Jackson has an argument for MVP, but I think that down the stretch, and I think in terms of total touchdowns, both guys have the same amount. It's going to be very interesting, and I was saying that Josh Allen may not be there yet in terms of an MVP showing, but if he has games like this where he has 4 touchdowns, both passing and rushing, in weeks 16, 17, and 18, like, he's going to really pile it up and have, like, 40-something total touchdowns on the season, and it might happen. He might win. He might deserve MVP. But it's his to lose right now. He's the front runner. You could give it to Lamar. If the Bengals were a better team, you could even give it to Joe Burrow. Saquon had an off week, but he's probably going to bounce back against the Commanders. But again, that's neither here nor there. We'll come to that bridge when we come to it. I'm going with the Lions on this one. They're going to beat the Patriots. I mean, this is a layup game for them. The Bills are looking really good these last couple games in terms of scoring, but they've also given up 40-plus points too, which is also a big concern as well. So they're putting up a lot of fireworks, but they need to stop letting teams score 40 points on them because the Rams did that last week too. I'm going with the Bills. They're going to run away with this game, and they're going to beat the Patriots. Next up, we have the Detroit Lions at the Chicago Bears. Similarly, with the Bills, the Lions lost to the Bills 48-42. Offensively, they had a great showing. Jared Goff, 38 of 59 for 494 yards, 5 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, and 118.9 passer rating. And then Amon-Ra St. Brown had 14 receptions for 193 yards and a touchdown. Very impressive there. Sam Laporta had 7 receptions for 111 yards as well. So an incredible offensive showing, but defensively, they gave up 48 points, which is not good. I would hearken the Lions to Meldrick Taylor against Julio Cesar Chavez in their 1991 championship match. I'm not going to go into too much detail about that. It's a boxing match from the early 90s. Basically what happened was Meldrick Taylor was dominating the fight early on, and then in the later rounds, he started to fade and get tired, and he was knocked out with 3 seconds left. That's what I see happening with the Lions right now. They are suffering from a lot of really bad injuries, and if they can just make it to the finish line, get some of these guys healthy, they're going to benefit from that bye. They have a chance at doing this, but the injuries are piling up, and it's not looking good, especially when you give up 48 points. I understand the Bills are a great offense, but they're going to be playing great offenses in the playoffs, right? So it's going to be very interesting, and I don't think I have them as number 1 in the power rankings anymore. You're going to see who I think who is number 1 in the power rankings right now, and it's not them. As for the Bears, they've lost 7 straight since the Hail Mary. There's not much to say about the Bears. Poor Caleb Williams just cannot catch a break. I was watching the game, and he's running for his life. This is like rookie year Matt Stafford, rookie year Trevor Lawrence, rookie year Bryce Young. Like, you would think that like the Bears they're not a bad team. Like they had what, 7 wins last year. They're playing like they were a bottom 5 team. They got their rookie quarterback, and they have nothing around him because he's running for his life. I think Caleb Williams is a talented quarterback, and I see it in his play that he's not a deer in the headlights. His offensive line is giving him nothing to work with. He's getting murdered out there. So maybe the Bears can be better next year if they really invest in the offensive line or something. But they need to give something to Caleb Williams so he's not just eviscerated every single week rather. I'm going with the Lions. This is going to be a good bounce-back game for them. They need to do better defensively. Offense is there, but their defense cannot keep letting games like this happen. Next up, we have the Cleveland Browns at the Cincinnati Bengals. The Bengals beat the Tennessee Titans, once again scoring 37 points, but they also gave up 27 against the Tennessee Titans. Both these teams' seasons are over. Not much to say. Jameis Winston, I heard, is getting benched for Dorian Thompson-Robinson. The Browns' season is over. There's not much to say with that. It's the Battle of Ohio. Cincinnati is going to win, but I mean, this is one of those pointless games. I'm not really going to go into much detail. The Cincinnati Bengals are going to win. Speaking of meaningless games, we have the Tennessee Titans at the Indianapolis Colts. Both teams lost. The Colts are 6-8, and they're technically still in the hunt, but they just don't have anything going for them either. Anthony Richardson had another typical Anthony Richardson game. 17 of 38, for 172 yards, 2 interceptions, a 36.3 passer rating. And then Jonathan Taylor, Deshaun Jacksoned himself by dropping the ball on the 1-yard line before he actually got in the end zone. That isn't even the first time that's happened this year, and Jonathan Taylor should know better, which is a very disappointing thing to see from such a strong running back. But that it just kind of encapsulates what's going on with the Colts right now. They're going to beat the Titans, spoiler alert, but I worry for the Colts' future because they're in mediocrity hell right now. Anthony Richardson does not look like their guy, and I would give him until the middle of next season because, here's the issue. You look at what Bryce Young has been doing with the Panthers. At least he is showing some progress in his games. The Panthers are still losing, but Bryce Young is putting things together. I don't see that with Anthony Richardson. All of his games are the same. He completes half of his passes. He throws 1 or 2 interceptions. He's not having a good year. This isn't he's a young quarterback and he's going to make mistakes. He's having a bad year. If we look at Anthony Richardson's stats right now, in terms of his overall stat line and his touchdown interception ratio and all that stuff, if I can just pull it up right here really quickly, we're looking at a guy who has 7 touchdowns to 11 interceptions, a 60 passer rating, and a 47 completion percentage. Those are bad numbers. Those are really bad numbers. And I think that the problem is this is going to turn into a failed experiment for the Colts. And they're going to have to go out and either get another veteran quarterback, rent another veteran quarterback. Spoiler, guys, Aaron Rodgers might be available, but their quarterback struggles continue, and they've been continuing for the last 5 years ever since they lost Andrew Luck, and they just don't know what to do. Out of all their quarterbacks, Phillip Rivers was probably the best one, and it's a shame that he didn't want to stay for another year because he could have been a very good rental until they actually got the guy that they wanted, but it's going bad for the Colts. They're going to win this game, but a bigger concern is for their future. Next up, we have the LA Rams at the New York Jets. The Rams are coming off a pretty disappointing victory. How about that? Against the 49ers, they won 12-6. They're 8-6. They took the NFC West from the Seattle Seahawks, which is very interesting. You can never count out the Rams with Sean McVay and Matt Stafford. They can beat any team on any given week. And for that reason, I think they're a dangerous team to play in the playoffs. But the Jets are interesting because they went against the Jaguars. They won 32-25. Now, everything I'm about to say here, take with a grain of salt because they went against the Jaguars. Aaron Rodgers was 16 of 30, 289 yards, 3 touchdowns, 120 passer rating, and then Davante Adams, 9 receptions for 198 yards and 2 touchdowns. Both guys turned back the clock, and they had vintage Davante Adams and Aaron Rodgers performances. It looked like it was 2020, and they were the Green Bay Packers again. So it looked very good. It was nice to see, but it was against the Jacksonville Jaguars. So what I saw from that game is I don't think Aaron Rodgers is as washed as some people say he is. He's a weird guy. We all want him to fail, but his arm is still there. He can still throw the ball. I think that he can still play. Seeing how Kirk Cousins is playing and seeing how Aaron Rodgers is playing is very different. I think the team is failing Aaron Rodgers. There are some players that no matter how good they are, they can't overcome a bad team. And I think that's just what's happening. The Jets team is in disarray. They don't have a head coach. They don't have an offensive coordinator. It doesn't matter if you're a Hall of Fame quarterback. If you don't have a good system around you, you can only do so well. But it's games like this that show me that Aaron Rodgers still has a lot left in the tank. You know what I mean? He's uninhibited by his scheme. He's able to throw the ball to his guy. I think Rodgers still has it. And if he doesn't come back with the Jets, he's going to get a job with another team for his age 42 season. I really, really think so. He's a weird guy. He's a selfish guy. He doesn't take accountability. Whatever you want to say about his character, I still think he can play football, and I think that's going to still get him a job next year. All that being said, the Jets are a team in disarray. The Rams are going to take advantage of that, and they're going to beat the Jets. They're going to improve to 9-6, and that's going to be a tough thing for the Seahawks to swallow as the Rams slowly pull ahead of the NFC West, I'm going with the Rams. So this next game, we're talking about the Washington Commanders. They are going against the Philadelphia Eagles. Spoiler alert, I have the Eagles at number 1 in my power rankings. This is the dangerous thing with the Eagles. They are fully back to their 2022 form. And what was dangerous about the 2022 Eagles is they were so strong and relentless. They did what they were supposed to do against bad teams, and then they rose to the occasion against good teams. That's exactly what they did against the Steelers. You talk about good teams not being able to do well against good teams. They beat up on bad teams so everyone thinks they're good. The Eagles aren't like that. They rise themselves to the occasions and play good teams well, and they beat them. That's what they did against the Steelers, and that's what they've done throughout the entire season. They have a 122 positive point differential, and they are 12-2 with the Detroit Lions. The Minnesota Vikings, Detroit Lions, and Eagles are all 12-2. Any one of those teams can be the number 1 seed, and right now it's looking like it's going to be the Eagles. They look phenomenal. After everyone was giving them crap about not passing the ball, Jalen Hurts was 25 of 32, 290 yards, 2 touchdowns, 125.3 passer rating. A.J. Brown had 8 receptions for 110 yards and a touchdown, and then Devonta Smith had 11 receptions for 109 yards and a touchdown. So they can get it done in the air, they can get it done on the ground, and they have the number 1 defense in terms of points allowed and yards allowed. If you ask me, the Eagles are the Super Bowl favorites right now. We are rapidly approaching either Eagles-Chiefs or Eagles-Bills. That's what I see right now in terms of the Super Bowl. Right now, I think that the conference championship is going to go, well, we'll go over this with the playoff picture, but spoiler alert, it's looking like Bills and Eagles for me in the Super Bowl, and that's just going to be a very exciting Super Bowl. I cannot wait to see it. But the Eagles are looking good. As for the Commanders, they beat the Saints 20-19. It came down to the very last play when it shouldn't have. The Commanders had a pretty flawless first half, starting 14-0, and then the Saints rallied and scored 12 points in the fourth quarter to almost tie up the game. Say what you want about the time clock not running down on that last play, giving them a chance to spike the ball for one last play, fixing the game, yada, yada, yada. We had a lot of timely penalties, 2 roughing the passer calls that just moved them down the field. We had 80 yards in penalties, which is not okay. We were driving down the field at one point. This was when we missed that 50-yard field goal. And Jane Daniels made a great play to, I don't know who it was. I want to say it was maybe Alameda Zacchaeus or something, or De'Ami Brown. It was like a 15, 20-yard pass over the middle that put us in the red zone and in field goal range. And it was called back by a holding call, right? And I think that is what really sold us in that game, or were the untimely penalties at the very end. We almost let that game slip between our fingers, but we won, and we were supposed to win. Jane Daniels had a great game. 25-31, 226 yards, 2 touchdowns, 118.5 passer rating. What concerns me, though, is he was sacked 8 times. 8 times is really, really bad. So they're going to have to do a lot better with that. Terry McLaurin also had 2 receiving touchdowns. He's on 11 for the season, second most in the league, and he's having an all-pro caliber season. So I am very happy for Scary Terry. He's finally having the season that I knew he could have. He's always had this in him, and he's been held back by quarterback play. And I think he's one of the best players that the Commanders have had in the last 20 years. And I don't think that's a hot take. I think you could put Terry McLaurin up against the likes of guys like A.J. Brown. I really do. When he has a quarterback throwing to him, he's been nerfed by bad quarterback play for so long. And I think that he's finally unleashing his abilities. And I think we're finally seeing it. But I think the Eagles are going to win this game. Even though it's at home, I'd be shocked if the Commanders won. If the Commanders won, that's a huge victory for us. It's the biggest win we've had all season. And it's going to be a very encouraging one as well. But I don't see that happening. I think the Eagles are a very complete team. And all this talk about Nick Sirianni being fired, I don't know what it is. He was arguing with one of his coaches or something really, really weird. But they're playing like the best team in the league right now, just like they were in 2022. So I'm going with the Eagles. I think they're going to win. Next up, we have the Arizona Cardinals at the Carolina Panthers. Not much to say about this game. Both these teams, the Cardinals are, what's their record? The Cardinals are 7-7, and they are technically still alive, vying for the spot that the Rams have for their division. And while they could get it, I don't think the Rams are really going to collapse to the level that the Cardinals can, reach them. This is a rebuilding year for the Cardinals, and they're doing a lot better this year than they were last year. The Cardinals should win this game, and I am going with the Cardinals. Again, the Panthers are in a rebuild as well, but they're a bit further behind. What the Cardinals need is to make that step up in 2025. If they continue to be a mid-team, this is a failed rebuild, and they're going to be stuck in mediocrity hell like the Washington Commanders have been. Ron Rivera came in. We made the playoffs in 2020. We were a 7 or 8 win team, kind of making things happen, and then we were 3-14, rebuild over, start a new regime. I see that happening with the Cardinals if things don't change. They really need to make that step up. But I'm going with the Cardinals. They're going to improve to 8-7, and they're doing all right. Next up, we have the Minnesota Vikings at the Seattle Seahawks. This is another one. I'm going to be very brief. We're at the 4 o'clock slate. I'm going with the Vikings on this one. The Seahawks had a chance to play well against a good team in the Green Bay Packers, and they really were sold out as the pretenders that they are. They're 8-6, and they're still in this, but they're showing up like they're a decent team that has benefited from an easy schedule, and when they play an actual contender, they folded, and that's what's going to happen here. The Vikings are just a strong, good, overall, all-around team, and Sam Darnold, I think at this point, you need to sign Sam Darnold, because what can you get out of J.J. McCarthy that Sam Darnold hasn't shown you this year? You know what I mean? Like Sam Darnold's playing like the number 1 overall pick. He's playing like everyone expected him to play. Just roll with him. Roll with him as your franchise quarterback. He's 27 years old. Hypothetically speaking, if he plays at this level, you have your franchise quarterback for the next 10 years. And yes, you stumbled upon him accidentally, but you can still have him for 8 or 9 years. If he's going to give you a 13-win season, just go with him. Trade J.J. McCarthy to a quarterback-needy team, get some extra draft picks, and build your team up even more. If I'm a Vikings fan, I'm very excited for what the future holds for them, because they went from being, this is a reload year, to holy shit, we could run this division in the future. We have to compete with the Lions, but we could be a perennial playoff team, So I'm going with the Vikings. This next game is a tank bowl unlike any other. We had the Jacksonville Jaguars at the Las Vegas Raiders. It doesn't really matter who wins this game. This is a tank bowl. The Raiders are vying for the number 1 overall spot to get Shedeur Sanders or somebody else. It's not going to matter. There's no generational talent in the draft right now that they could get that would help them. So they're in so much trouble. In the offseason, I'm going to try and make more off-season content. And I honestly think that I need to make something about the Raiders, because they are a really, really embarrassing team. So I'm going with the Jaguars. So this next game, we have the San Francisco 49ers at the Miami Dolphins. This game is all about teams with wasted potential. These poor teams. The 49ers lost 12-6, and the Dolphins lost 20-12. Tua threw 3 interceptions. Both of these teams' seasons are over. Neither of them are really going to make a push for the playoffs at this stage. It's really disappointing that the 49ers' Super Bowl window appears to be closing. They're up there with the early 2000s Eagles and the 90s Bills as good units that came so close to a championship but didn't get it. And I'm really concerned about their future, because they're going to have to pay Brock Purdy, and a lot of their talent is aging out. Trent Williams is aging out. George Kittle's aging out. A lot of these guys are aging out, and they may enter a new era of 49ers football that isn't exactly the best. So I'm going to go with the 49ers, though. I think they are going to win. Tua Tagovailoa, by one of my YouTube compatriots, Barry McCockiner, he compared him to Derek Carr, and that is a terrible comparison, because that means that you have all the makeups of a franchise quarterback, but you're a loser and you can't beat good teams. And I think that's one of the worst things you can. Well, it's good if you want to make money, but if you want to win championships, that's not the best thing to be as a quarterback. But go with the 49ers. So for Sunday Night Football, we have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at the Dallas Cowboys. The Buccaneers really came out storming with a 40-17 victory over the LA Chargers, which was incredibly impressive. Baker Mayfield was 22 of 27, 288 yards, 4 touchdowns, an interception, 135.3 passer rating. He's having a great year. This is the best season of Baker Mayfield's career. I'm overjoyed for him that he's found a home in Tampa. It looks like he's going to be their franchise quarterback. This is the quarterback you could have had, the Browns, Cleveland Browns. This is the quarterback you guys could have had. And now Tampa Bay is just going to have him. It's hilarious. But Mike Evans also 9 receptions for 159 yards and 2 touchdowns. He is getting close to that 1,000-yard marker. He's got 3 more games to do it, but he really needs to ball out these last 3 games to reach that 1,000-yard mark. But if he does, I think he's going to be a lock for the Hall of Fame because it shows you how much he wants it. So that's what I have to say about that. They're going to win. They're going to beat the Cowboys. Not much to say. The Cowboys are at a lost season as well. They need to make some changes in the offseason, changes that they did not make. So for that reason, I'm going with the Buccaneers. And last but not least, we have the New Orleans Saints at the Green Bay Packers. So what I gathered from the Packers game is they were a lot better than I thought they were. Beating a team like the Seahawks 30-13 is a very, very impressive showing. You know, like Jordan Love was 20 of 27, 229 yards, 2 touchdowns, 123.8 passer rating. And then Josh Jacobs had 94 yards and a rushing touchdown. So I think it's going to be pretty simple here. I think the Packers are going to win this one. The Saints had a chance to beat the Commanders on that last play, but, I mean, they were just doing it to try and win the game, which I guess is what you're supposed to do when you're 5-8, but it is what it is. I'm going with the Packers. I think they're going to win. Now we look at the playoff picture. So you can see right there, that's what we're looking at with the playoff picture. Not too much has changed, really. One of the biggest things is that the Chiefs have the number 1 seed still, and with the Broncos and Chargers playing each other, some seeding might change. In addition, the Steelers and Ravens playing each other, because that could change seeding as well. So those are some of the big ones. The Texans aren't going to be threatened. The Bills aren't going to be threatened by their seeding, and the Chiefs probably aren't going to be threatened by their number 1 seed. So those are going to be some of the big changes. But the AFC is pretty wide open in terms of who could play who and who could go on a run, because all these teams are really, really strong. So it'd be very interesting to see who wins that one. And then in terms of the NFC, the Lions are still the number 1 seed, but the Eagles and the Vikings are both 12-2. So that could very easily change. And then ironically, the 5, 6, and 7 seeds are all have better records than the Buccaneers and the Rams at 8-6. However, I think both of those teams are really, really good, and I think they could beat anyone else in the playoff picture. The only thing that could really change is if the Falcons upset someone and they sneak in over the Buccaneers, or if the Seahawks or Cardinals get hot and beat out the Rams. So there's a lot more rejiggering from in the hunt in the NFC than in the AFC in terms of teams switching places and getting spots over other people. So there's chances that stuff like that can change. But in terms of my power rankings, like the way I see the power rankings, again, I'm going to be very quick with this. Eagles are number 1. They're looking like the best team in the league right now. Below them, I'm going to go with the Chiefs. Below them, I'm going to go with the Bills. At number 4, I'm going with the Lions. At number 5, I'm going with the Vikings. The power rankings have remained kind of the same for these last couple weeks. These are the 5 best teams in the league, and it's just jumping around. But with the way the Eagles have been playing, I think they could beat anyone, and it's all about them staying healthy. But they're looking really, really good, and like this might be their year. They're getting hot at the right time. They've won 10 straight. They're getting hot at the right time. And if they keep this momentum going into the playoffs, I think one of the few teams that could beat them are the Bills and the Chiefs. And there's not many other teams in the AFC or the NFC for that matter that could beat them. I think the Vikings could upset them maybe, or the Packers maybe, but they look like they're winners. So that about wraps it up. That's week 16. We're coming near the end of the regular season, folks, and I'll see you next time for week 17.